All right, let me share my screen with you guys. Do it that way, probably. Boom. All right. Once again, thank you very much for joining me. What we're going to be talking about is using AI for job hunting. So if you're on the market and looking for a job, if you have a job and you think the job might be going away, or if you just want to prepare for the future so that if the day ever comes, this is exactly the conversation that you want to have. Well, congratulations. We live in the 21st century. We've got lots and lots of these AI tools that seem to be falling out of the sky. And the interesting question is we can use them for a whole bunch of different things. And if we're looking for a job, what the heck? We probably should be able to use it for that too, right? So let's give this a shot and see how we'd actually go about doing that. All right, now right off the bat, let's start talking about what you should not do if you're looking for a job in a world of AI. Okay, you have to be very careful about anything that AI generates that you think about including in a LinkedIn profile or on your resume, because AI content can sound like it's AI content. It can sound robotic, generic, and of course, it might not have anything to do with you. Remember, AI tools are fabulous and they're wonderful and they're great, but they can go crazy, right? And so ultimately, what this really means is anything that you ever create using an AI tool, you are responsible for reviewing and making sure that it's actually accurate and correct and that you would like to include it. All right. Now, remember, if you're a recruiter, somebody who's trying to find somebody for a job, these days, recruiters have to put up with a lot of artificial intelligence generated garbage, right? But, it's even worse because companies have to put up with the same stuff, right? These guys are getting inundated with basically resumes that are written by AI, right? And if they see them, they've come to recognize them and they throw them away. So what's going to be very, very important coming out of our discussion tonight is that you learn how to use AI to make your resume and your LinkedIn profile better. So that's fabulous and wonderful. But you don't want to make it look like either one of those have been written by AI. So it's a subtle difference, but it is a very, very important difference for you to keep in mind. Okay. Now, today, if you're looking for a job, there are arguably two major portions to any job search. The first one is your LinkedIn profile, right? LinkedIn is a fantastic and wonderful online tool. Okay. It's going to be out there working for you 24 by 7 by 365, telling the world what you bring to the table. Fabulous, wonderful. Now, as fabulous as LinkedIn is, you need to understand there's a lot of other people who use it. So you've got a lot of competition, right? Your goal with your LinkedIn profile is to get a recruiter's attention. Somebody who has a job, who's trying to fill the kind of job that you'd like to have, they want you want them to discover your LinkedIn profile, to discover you, and to reach out to you and have a talk with you about the job they're trying to fill. Okay. They are looking for somebody to fill the job, and we want them to see that you are a person they'd like to talk to. Now, LinkedIn's only half the story, right? The other half of the story is going to be, of course, your resume. Now, arguably, your resume is only going to be useful once you're in the door, once somebody wants to know more about you. Okay. Here, once again, in that pesky 21st century, we often have to deal with something called an ATS, which is an applicant tracking system. It's a piece of software that a lot of companies have started to rely on to process people who are applying for jobs. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. But your resume is going to have to be good enough to get past it. Okay. And then the other question is going to be, does it pass the 6-second test? So recruiters and companies, they've got a lot of resumes coming in, and they're going to scan your resume. And if it doesn't pass the 6-second test, boop, they're going to pitch it, right? They're not going to look at it any further. So we got to make sure that everything that you have that speaks of you captures people's attentions and knows and lets those people know that you're the right person for the job. All right, so it's time to say hello to AI tools. You're not going after a job by yourself. anymore. There's a bunch of tools out there and they're there to help you. Now remember, it's getting a little crowded. We've got ChatGPT, sort of like the grandfather of all the tools. We've got Copilot from our good friends at Microsoft. We've got Gemini from our good friends at Google. And there's also Claude out there. So there's a lot of different AI tools for you to select from. For this particular presentation, I have selected to use Claude. And there's a very specific reason why I've done that. I've selected Claude because it seemed to be better at generating well-worded responses. And everything can always, of course, change over time. But as of the creation of this particular presentation, Claude seems to speak the best. All right, so let's have a little talk about LinkedIn. Everyone knows about LinkedIn, but let's just make sure we're on the same page here, right? So your LinkedIn profile is arguably your best resume, right? Recruiters trawl LinkedIn looking for candidates for a given job opening. Now, remember, you got to keep this in mind. A recruiter doesn't necessarily know anything about the job they're trying to fill, right? They've been handed a job description and told, go find me some qualified candidates for this job. So they might not know anything about chemistry, they might not know anything about sales, might not know anything about marketing, they might not know anything about software, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A whole bunch of different fields that they might be trying to find jobs for. And so they have to go out and do it to the best of their ability. Okay. You need to keep in mind that you want to become somebody that recruiters find. Okay. One important thing that you might want to scribble a note down is that you want to set yourself a reminder. You want to switch some keywords in your profile, perhaps every 2 weeks or so. And the reason you want to do that is because LinkedIn's site algorithm is going to see that you changed, okay? And when that happens, when it rescans it, and when that happens, is it's going to say, oh, this is a brand new resume, and you're going to move your way up to the top of a recruiter's searches. Remember, when they go searching for somebody, they're going to get a huge collection of people who have a particular set of skills. You'd like your resume to automatically be towards the top of that, and you do that by changing it. So it's not an old, stale resume that's been sitting around for a long time. Okay? So I have a colleague by the name of Richard Beatty, and I called him up and I said, hey, I'm getting ready to give this presentation. I said, Richard, could I get a copy of your resume? And he said, you know, it's interesting, Jim. He said, I've been working, it turns out, for about 50 years, surprise, surprise, and I've never had a resume. First off, stunning. Wait, what? Really? The thing is Richard's an excellent networker. So he's never actually needed to have a resume. I said, okay, no problems whatsoever. I said, I'll tell you what, Richard, I will build you a resume as a result of this particular presentation. I said, okay, so let's sit down and have a talk about what you've done and where you've done it. He said, oh my God, you got some time? And it took a little while. So you see on the screen, basically just some information from Richard. So Richard got a college degree a long time ago. Then he went to work for the Tampa Bay Electric Company, TECO, and he started out in 1974 as a distribution engineer, and then he worked his way up. He had a whole series of different jobs. Notice actually, I think the bottom 3 indicate that he got fired. So Richard has amazing ability to come back, and hats off to him for being able to do that. But here's the thing. He's worked for TECO in a whole number of different positions, and I have all of his information in a particular document. So I grabbed all of his work history. So I have this information, which is great, but it's not a LinkedIn profile, and it's also not a resume. But maybe I can get some help in turning it into those. So let's go on. Let's take a look. What else we got? What else do we know about Richard? Well, I gave a presentation a few years ago talking about LinkedIn, and Richard was a real trooper. He said, I don't have a LinkedIn profile. I said, well, fantastic. As part of my presentation, can I create one for you? He said, go for it. So boof, he's got a LinkedIn profile. I'm so proud of him. And he's got a, notice that underneath his name, there's a line that describes the type of job that you're looking for, which is incredibly important so that recruiters know what you're looking for. Every LinkedIn profile also has an about section, okay? And the about section describes you. And this is a great place to include nouns that a recruiter might be using to search for a candidate. Remember, recruiters don't know anything about the job, okay? But if they find a bunch of nouns in the job description that also match up in your about section, then all of a sudden they start thinking that you might be a good candidate for the job that they're searching for. So that's pretty good stuff. Now, LinkedIn profiles have another portion to them. And LinkedIn profile has experience, okay? And in the experience, you can list all of the companies that you've worked for. And that's exactly what Richard did here. He did a great job of listing at the time the 3 companies that he'd worked for. It turns out the list is actually much longer. But what he didn't do is he didn't use this as an opportunity to describe what he did during each of his jobs. All right, so let's see if we can help Richard out, shall we? So how will we actually go about doing this? Well, I've got Claude waiting around for me. So this is Claude, the AI tool, who looks pretty much like all those other AI tools. So what do I want to do right off the bat? Well, right off the bat, I think what I want to do is I want to say, I gotta have a discussion. I gotta have a dialogue with Claude. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Claude who I want him to be. Okay, Claude will take on any personality that I would like him to be. This case, I want him to be an expert resume writer with 20 years of experience helping technology professionals land their dream job. So I'm going to say, yeah, Claude, this is who I want you to be for our discussion tonight. And I do that, and he kicks back. He says, fine. He says, not a problem. I'm ready to help you with your resume needs. Hot diggity, because that's exactly what I need. With 2 decades of experience in tech recruiting and resume writing, I've seen what works and what doesn't in the competitive industry. I've helped engineers, product managers, data scientists, and a whole bunch of other people. Hot diggity. Okay, so Claude's mindset now is that he is an expert resume writer, okay? Which means he'll answer all of my questions from that mindset, which is exactly what I want. So, what do I want? Well, for my buddy Richard, I got some other stuff here. So let's see what I want to do here. So Richard would be saying, I'm a professional engineer. I've worked for the Tampa-based electrical company called TECO. I would like to update my LinkedIn profile with a description of my experience at TECO. Here's a list of the jobs that I had while I worked for them. And I took what we just took a look at, the distribution engineer, meter engineer, all the jobs he had at TECO, and I've listed them out here. So now I'm going to give this to Claude and say, hey, Claude, what could you give me that I could include in my LinkedIn profile? And Claude's going to come back and say, hey, not a problem whatsoever. I can help you craft a professional LinkedIn summary that highlights your extensive engineering experience at TECO. Claude's going to say, hey, I'm going to recommend making some adjustments in how we present the information. Notice one of the very first things that Claude suggests is we remove the fired references. Hi, Claude. I think that's actually a great idea. Okay, no problems. He's going to say consolidate and focus. And this is actually very interesting. He says instead of listing every position chronologically, he says let's instead come up with a narrative. And that's a great idea because Richard had a lot of jobs at TECO. And if we just list each one of them out line by line, it would be hard for a recruiter to really understand what he did for them. And he said, modernize the language. Ouch, that hurts because I made the notes based on what Richard had done. So here's actually what he came up with. This is what Claude came up with. He said Richard had worked for Tampa Electric Company from 1974 to 1994. He was a senior engineer and he did a bunch of different things. Gives me a quick overview. Led engineering initiatives across multiple disciplines, including distribution systems, IT infrastructure, telecommunications, and operational dispatch. Key achievements include 1, 2, 3, 4. So he took all of those jobs that Richard had and shrunk it down into 4 main accomplishments, right? Not bad. Okay. I think that would be fantastic. And if I'm a recruiter and I'm moving fast and I don't have a ton of time to spend on stuff, I would actually take a look at this and go, wow, okay, that's fine. I can take the time to read that because I might not have the time to read everything else that you just gave me. Okay. And then I could say, that's actually pretty good. You have all my stuff. Could you give me 3 accomplishments that Richard accomplished while he was at TECO? And that says no problems whatsoever, right? So let's take a look at all those jobs that Richard had. Here's 3 major accomplishments. And that's something that I could work into my LinkedIn description, right? Built and led cross-functional engineering department, pioneered early computer applications for utility operations, and managed mission-critical power infrastructure. Bam. Once again, he did all those things, and there's just 3 of them. And arguably, once again, remember, a recruiter's not going to do a ton of reading, so 3 is probably about the right number, what I wanted to do there. Okay. Um, so this is good because we got the whole TICO thing taken care of. Okay. Now, Richard has a lot of other work experience. Okay. And so got TICO taken care of. Now, what would I do about the next one? So here's my next job. How can I update my LinkedIn profile experience section to include it? Well, great question. So I'll give you the information that I have on it, and poof, here's what it does. He says, look, okay, so he worked for Vector Services in 1995 as a consulting engineer, gives me a bullet that says what he did during that particular job. Fantastic. So he's got a job and he's got an accomplishment at that job. This is great stuff. All right. I think I want to move on. Let me just double check here. Oh, yeah, we'll go on a little bit. All right. Fabulous. So this is I'm a professional engineer. We did that. How about 3 accomplishments? And here's my next job. How can I update my LinkedIn profile? So once again, now with Richard, because he didn't have very much, I was just taking what I had, giving it to Claude, and Claude was returning something. So I was getting pretty much straight AI stuff. Not a problem whatsoever. Before any of this could be added to Richard's LinkedIn profile, he'd have to look it over and he'd probably have to change the wording so it looked like he was writing it, not like Claude was writing it. That's fine, because that's much easier to do than coming up with it from scratch. So this is fantastic stuff. Here's a complete list of my work history. Could you suggest what I could put into my LinkedIn account about section? Well, that's a good question. So here's the actual question. Here's my complete work history. Oh my God, with everything that he has done, what could I put into my about section? So we'll go ahead and go click here and we'll say, do it. So this is Richard's entire career. Okay, for like 50 years he's worked. And what we want to do, it looks like I did something wrong here. So how about we do copy? Sorry, my bad. Let me just double check, make sure. Here's my complete list. Could you suggest what I could put into my LinkedIn about section? Okay, so once again, so this is Richard's complete work history, everything he's done over the last 50 years. Now, the about section's relatively small, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to take his entire career and I want to go ahead and crank out just a few lines that sort of summarizes what he has done that I could put into my LinkedIn profile. And so it says, listen, Richard's an electrical engineer, infrastructure system specialist, high voltage and surge protection expert. And then it gives me a few lines here talking about his over 50 years of engineering experience. And then it talks about his core expertise in power systems, telecommunications infrastructure, lighting and surge protection, software systems integration. Bam. And then he talks about what he is doing currently. Bam. Okay. If you cared, you could include his education. Always interested in discussing challenging engineering problems. Bam. That's it. And that's fabulous. That would look so good in a LinkedIn about section because it really captures the essence of Richard, right? Thank you very much, Claude, because I had this much history information and it was able to process it all and give me just the portion that I needed for an about section. All right. So obviously we can apply, in this case, Claude, to our LinkedIn profile. We can make our individual job descriptions read well, okay? And by the way, if you already have a job description, you can pull that job description out, you can drop it into Claude and say, hey, Claude, can you help me make this better? And Claude will read it, it'll understand who you are, because he's now, of course, a resume professional. And he will give you a suggestion for changing your wording to give it more impact for a recruiter, which is your ultimate target. So once again, if you already have it, it's even easier to make it better. Okay. So now we're done with LinkedIn. Let's talk about your resume, shall we? Okay. The resume that you produce has to be what we call highly skimmable. Once again, your target audience, okay, who is probably a recruiter or maybe somebody who works at the company that you want to work for, doesn't have a lot of time and probably has a lot of resumes to make their way through. So your resume has to be easy to read quickly or skimmable. The recruiter is looking for probably the 4 or 5 things that the hiring manager said that the candidate needed to have, or otherwise just don't even spend your time with it. So once again, sort of what the recruiter is trying to do is trying to eliminate resumes so they don't have to spend any more time on them. So they're going to scan your resume looking for the things that they said was important in the job description. A resume that's hard to skim, hard to look at very quickly, or doesn't mention your key skills isn't going to pass the person who's looking at it. They're going to pitch it and move on to the next one that perhaps is easier to read. You want to focus on your relevant professional work history. Recruiters are going to be looking for a match to the job that they're trying to fill. It's the job that they have in their hand right now. The question is, are you a candidate for it? Okay. Now, if you have been working for a while, congratulations, first off, of course. And if your resume is expanded to 2 pages, not a problem whatsoever. That's completely okay. Do make sure that you include enough white space to make sure that your 2-page resume is able to be read quickly, okay? And of course, do all the basic sort of stuff, including like bold job titles and stuff like that, so they can see where you worked and what your title was at each one of your impressive list of jobs, okay? We often talk about soft skills, the ability to interact with people and get people to do things and stuff like that. And those are fantastic and wonderful skills to have. There is no question about it whatsoever. Interestingly enough, they don't really belong on your resume. Okay. Instead, your resume is a fabulous place to list your hard skills, the things that you've done that have actually produced results. And when I say produced results, what that means is that we can actually measure them. Things that you've done that can be measured through the numbers that they generated, right? It's going to be great to have those soft skills. And in fact, if you get an opportunity to get interviewed by somebody, it'd be a great thing to stress during the interview. I get along with people. I work well with people. I get people to do things for me. Those are fabulous and wonderful skills. There's no pushback on that whatsoever. But your resume is not the place for that to be showing up. Okay? So what makes a great resume? So most recruiters review resumes in less than 10 seconds. Okay? So either you've got it or you don't. Okay? Your resume should do a very good job of storytelling. What does that actually mean when we're talking about a resume? Does it start out once upon a time? The answer is no, it doesn't. Instead, what you want your resume to do is to tell a precise story of your career growth. What that means is every single job that you had, it should look like it was part of a plan, okay? Now listen, between you and me right here talking, I understand that that might not be the way your career has worked out. You might have had a job, you got fired, you got dismissed, you went looking for a new job, you found a new job, you took that job and you moved on. All sorts of interesting things like that may have happened, okay? But here's the key thing. Based on where you've worked and what you've done, we want to build a story. We want to make it look like you move from one to another for a reason, okay? When you're describing the roles that you've held early in your career, you want to focus on smaller scale project impact. I mean, it's early on in your career. In the ones that you've had more recently, you want to show that you led product decisions or mentored others, which are bigger deals, right? So you start small in your career and you grow larger as you move farther into your career, showing that you had more responsibility and the company was counting on you to do more later in your career. Each role that you've had should be built logically on the previous one. You'd like to highlight your progression. Dear God, what does that mean? Well, it means that every single job should hopefully mean that you had a bigger scope. You're responsible for more. You developed a new set of skills by using new tools, okay? Or you were placed in a different position of leadership, okay? And it's going to be up to you to think about each one of those jobs that you've had and to find a scope, skill set, or leadership thing for that job, which makes it look like, of course, you left that one job and went to the new job because there's a great growth opportunity for you in the new job. It doesn't matter what happened to the last job. Company may have closed, may have gone out of business, all sorts of interesting. I fully understand that, but let's build a resume story that makes it look like you have been climbing the ladder for your entire career. Okay. Positioning, you probably want to favor projects, things that you've accomplished over certifications, right? Especially in the world of software, there's 10,000 different certifications you can get. But people who are hiring people have seen so many certifications. They probably don't even recognize all the jumble of letters that people can put and stuff like that. They don't really carry a lot of weight anymore. So things that you've actually done, big deal. Certifications, probably not such a big deal anymore. Okay. Clarity is key when it comes to your resume. You want to show the clear impact of your work in your project. You don't just want to show things you've been assigned to do. You want to show that you actually produced tangible results for the company that you work for. Every single bullet point on your resume should include a tangible result, metrics or improvements that demonstrated real impact. Okay, and the reason is because we want anybody who's looking at your resume to understand that the company who had employed you was lucky that you were there because you really delivered results for them. All right, even the best resume content can get overlooked if the formatting's messy. So this is almost like motherhood and apple pie, but it's always good to bring it up, right? A readable resume feels more professional, even before the recruiter's taken any time to read anything on it whatsoever. So you always want to make sure that the look and feel of your resume looks professional. It's not that hard to do, but you need to take a look at it with your eyes and make sure that it looks good. Okay. You want to opt for clean fonts, consistent spacing, clear section headers. Don't have a dense block of text that says all the fabulous, wonderful things that you did at a company, right? Add just enough white space to make sure that if somebody's skimming, going over your resume quickly, they can easily do that. Okay. You want to probably print out your resume at some point in time to see how it looks on paper before you ever submit it online. How does this look? And if you submit it online to somebody and they print it out, what are they actually going to see when they do that, right? I mean, a digital document can look much different than an actual physical version of the document. So make sure you know what the physical version looks like. Now, there's a value in tailoring your resume to the very specific, the job that you're going for, right? So you are going to want to study the job description. How do they describe the job that they're advertising? And you're going to want to take keywords from it to get past the applicant tracking system filters. Once again, we're going to dive into that later on, but you want to understand, and the key message here probably is that your resume that you create should be viewed as being your generic resume. Okay. Anytime you apply for a job, you need to customize your resume to tailor that resume for the job that you're applying for. Okay. You should aim to work relevant keywords into the professional summary in the resume and elaborate on them in the bullets of your expertise section. So somebody went to the effort to create a job description and said, hey, this is the job that we're advertising, and here's the skills that we're expecting the person who takes this job will have. You should grab those words and then you should work them into your resume. Okay. When they're reading your resume, we want them to see their words reflected back to them and have them start to think, wow, this person looks like they'd be a really good fit for this position. If you can get them thinking that, then the job's almost yours, right? All right. Richard doesn't have a resume. Let's come up with a resume for Richard, shall we? So we've already told Claude that we want Claude to be an expert resume writer with 20 years of experience. Done. Got that one taken care of. I need a resume created. Here's the information that I have in my career. So that's it. That's all we're going to have to be able to tell Claude. So let's go do that. So we have that floating around somewhere. Here we go. My name is Richard Beattie. I need a resume created. And then this is Richard's entire work history as he described it to me. So now let's go find Mr. Claude and say, yo, Claude, I would like to have I'll scroll to the top here so we just see what we're actually asking. Here's the, my name is Richard Beatty. I need a resume created. Here's the information that I have in my career. Remember, we're talking to Claude, and remember, we've told Claude that he is a professional resume writer. So Claude, go for it, buddy. Now, I'll create a professional resume for you that highlights your extensive engineering expertise and leadership experience. Let me craft this in a format that showcases your technical depth and career progression effectively. Now, remember, Richard is sort of a strange case, right? He's never had a resume. I suspect you probably already have a resume, and I hope you do and stuff like that. But that's fine. You can take parts of your resume that exists today and you can run them through Claude and say, Claude, this is what I currently have to describe who I am. How can I make it better? Right? So what does Claude tell me here? I've created a comprehensive resume that positions you as a highly experienced electrical engineer with deep expertise in critical infrastructure systems. Here are the key strategic decisions I made. So Claude's telling me what his thinking process was while he was creating Richard's resume. So I consolidated TECO experience. We know about that, right? So Richard's, 24 years or whatever it was with TECO was huge. So Claude shrunk it down to get more concise. He emphasized Richard's leadership and innovation, highlighted your unique lab work, positioned you as a technology pioneer, and focused on Richard's achievements. And he has key differentiators that he has. The resume emphasizes your technical depth while showing consistent career growth and leadership responsibilities. All right, so just stop for a brief moment here. We saw in Richard's description, in his own words, that he's been fired a whole bunch of times. We appreciate that. But Claude took in all that information and created a resume that shows consistent career growth and leadership responsibilities. Claude, thank you so much for doing that. Okay. Now, Claude also says, hey, listen, I can adjust it. So I've created one for you. Thank you very much. I can adjust it. I can add more technical stuff. I can emphasize different aspects of your expertise, and I can create a version targeted for specific types of opportunities. We're going to come back and talk to you about that, Claude. So let me go over here on the right-hand side. So this is Richard's resume. Fantastic. So it's Richard, and it's pretty much, this is pretty much how resumes look, right? So it starts out with a professional summary, accomplished electrical engineer with 50 plus years of progressive experience. All right, that's what we'd expect. It lists his core competencies. There's 3 of them: technical expertise, leadership and management, and software and systems. Talks about his education, fabulous and wonderful. Then we're going to jump into his professional experience, and it's going to start with the most recent one, which is Lightning Master here. It's going to give him a title. He's a senior electrical engineer for the Surge Suppression Laboratory. We've got the years that he's been working there, and it gives us 4 bullets for him. Previous to that, he was vice president engineer, 3 bullets. He worked for another company called Scientel. We got 3 bullets. Aardvark, we got 3 bullets. Vector Services, 3 bullets. Then we go to our Tampa Electric Company, where we're there for 24 years. And he calls out each one of his positions, and he has 3 bullets for each one of them. So we've got a very, very consistent style that Claude has put together when creating a resume for Richard. After all of that stuff, at the bottom of the resume, we're talking about his key achievements: laboratory innovation, department leadership, infrastructure scale, technology pioneer, and product innovation, and then wraps up with a professional focus. All right. So, I don't know if Richard would really like all the details on this one. I don't know if he'd organize it exactly this way, but considering the fact that he didn't have a resume before Claude cranked this out, that's not bad. That's pretty impressive, actually. All right, so we've gone from nothing to something. Now, in the bullets under each work, you want to list your accomplishments, not your tasks. Remember, we talked about this right off the bat, and so I think we did a pretty good job on that. Let's go up here we'll take a look at his lightning vest. So revitalized surge suppression department to deliver comprehensive lightning protection solutions combining structural protection, grounding, and electronic protection. So he rebuilt a department. So that shows he actually did something that produced value to the company. So I think that, yeah, no, that's an accomplishment. Bullet points sound like accomplishments or tasks. Please specify which ones sound like tasks. Okay, I think I'm set up to do that. So I took his Lightning Master bullets, and I can go here and I can say, yo, Claude, Do the following bullet points sound like accomplishments or tasks? Please specify which ones sound like tasks. So you could go to your resume right now, and if you're listing out some things that you did in a job and you're wondering, are those accomplishments or tasks? Guess what? You can just ask Claude. So let's have a little chat. Now, Claude just created these, so we would certainly hope that they're probably accomplishments. So his analysis is accomplishments, strong impact. So developed second largest Van de Graaff generator, established high voltage. And then the tasks were revitalized search department. That was pretty impressive, actually. Integrated three-tier protection approaches. Okay, cool, no problems. And then Claude, it's he's going to be rewording suggestions, okay, and key differences, okay, and he's active verbs, quantifiable results, and outcomes that benefited the company. So not bad. So I can take my bullets and go to Claude and say, hey, did I do these correctly? And Claude's going to come back with suggestions. He may say, good job, you've done a perfect changes, and then it's my decision as to whether or not I want to actually implement those changes. Now, careful, and this is a very important point. Do not let AI make up your accomplishments in a job, okay? That is something that only you know. You had the job, you did things while you were there. You're the one who's going to have to define what your accomplishments were. Now, in Richard's case, I had a discussion with him. I asked him what he did in each one of his jobs, and he told me. So we're on safe ground with Richard because I actually got it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So we're in actually a pretty good place. But you need to make up identify what your accomplishments were. Now, the good news is once you've done that, once you've done a fantastic and wonderful job of identifying each of your accomplishments in a job, all you really have to do then is, if you want, you can run to Claude and say, yo, Claude, is accomplishment or is it a task? And Claude will tell you. And in fact, if it turns out it's a task, bummer about that, he'll actually give you suggestions on how you can reword that task and turn it into an accomplishment. Okay? So, oops. I'm missing it. There we go. Ow. So always for each one of these items that you're listing in your resume, you want to ask yourself, how did what you did benefit either the company's customer or the company itself? Okay. You really want to showcase your results. So you could say something like, built a tool for automated testing of the chat feature that achieved significant cost savings. And that would be fantastic. That would be showing that you created something that benefit potentially the company's customer or the company itself, okay? You could go to Claude and you could say, hey, could you suggest ways to add more results or outcomes to the following bullet points under my work experience section? So if you're looking at something, you're going like, I don't have enough bullets. I don't think I go into enough depth on what I really accomplished in that job. You can ask Claude for help. Okay, and he'll take a look at what information you've provided him, and he can potentially make some pretty good suggestions. Okay, always though, you have to be very careful. When Claude makes suggestions, we appreciate the suggestions. There's no question about that whatsoever, but you can't take them at face value, right? You're going to have to figure out if it works into the story you're trying to tell in your resume. Okay, you always want to quantify your accomplishments. Okay, you did something. What was the result? What was the benefit to the company because you did that thing? Okay, roughly, about 60% of your accomplishments should have numbers associated with them. It's not hardcore, it's not set in stone or anything along those lines, but as a target, you'd like to have 60% of the things that you did for the company have numbers associated with them. So somebody who's reading it through can see exactly what the result of it was. Okay, so we're creating a resume for Richard. Remember, up at the top, he's got that professional summary section. Cool, no problem whatsoever. So what can we do with this? So top of the resume is fantastic because we can grab attention with a strong objective or professional summary at the top of Richard's resume or everybody's resume. Now, two different things here, strong objective or professional summary, and it depends on where you're at in your career, okay? An objective is what you put if you've been working for less than 2 years. No problems whatsoever. In your objective, you should highlight your education. Congratulations, a major accomplishment. And you should state your career goals. You haven't done that much yet, okay? So tell us what you want to accomplish. And hopefully that's going to line up with the job that you're going for, right? Now, if you've been working for a while, you should have a professional summary, okay? More than 2 years of experience. You should highlight your past professional experience and you should show your expertise and your key results. For an objective statement, can you help me write an objective statement for my resume? Here are my top 3 accomplishments in college, A, B, and C, and for my career goal, I would like to achieve X. If you give that to Claude, Claude can use that to create an objective statement for you that you then have to review to make sure that it's worded the way you'd like it to be worded, but you're rocking, right? Now, if you have a professional summary, your professional summary might look something like, I want to build my leadership skills while contributing to games that delight players. If you were going for a job at a gaming company, no problem whatsoever. Now, after you've done all this, you can always say, hey, can you make it more succinct and impactful and keep it under 3 lines? Yeah. So this is so cool because you can give Claude potentially what Claude has created and say, good, now I would like you to make it better. And Claude will take in what he has done and he will process it and he will give you an updated version matching exactly what you're asking for. Based on the work experience that I'm about to share with you, can you create a professional summary for my resume that's no more than 3 lines? Here's my work experience. I think I have this. Give me a second here. So yeah, I actually changed it just a little bit though. Here, let me just show you what I did here. Let's go find Claude. Where is, up here's Claude. Boom. Based on the work experience in my resume, which Claude already knows about, can you create a professional summary for my resume that's no more than 250 characters? It turns out 3 lines is roughly probably about 250 characters. So let's give it a shot and see what Claude can come up with for us. I didn't really mean that, but that's fine. Under 250. Oh, okay, so Claude's saying, screw you. No, Claude. I really meant 250 characters. So Claude's having a discussion with me and says, oh, you've done so much. I don't think I can limit myself to just 250 characters. And I'm saying, no, I really want 250 characters. And Claude says, oh, okay, great. And so he boiled all of Richard's accomplishments down into just effectively 3 lines of text, right? Which is fabulous. I could just drop that into a professional summary and I'm good to go, right? So notice that I can tell Claude exactly what I want. Mind you, Claude might fight me a little bit, but in the end, I will always win. All right. So now let's talk about tailoring your resume. So you've got a resume. Yay, you've got a generic resume. Okay. But now you've identified a job that you're interested in. Fantastic. I love identifying jobs. But what this means now is you're going to have to tailor your resume for that job. What it means is that you never send out your generic resume. You always send out a tailored resume. A tailored resume will always outperform your one-size-fits-all generic resume because it is designed for the job that you're applying for. Key important point here, do not rewrite your resume from scratch for each and every job that you apply for. That would be crazy and it would kill you as far as time, energy, and effort. Not worth it, okay? Instead, you need one master resume that has all the core points that you want to get across. And it's what, let's say about 90% ready for every single job that you're going to apply for. Gives you about 10% that you can customize for each particular job that you're interested in. Note, and this is an important point, you should be applying for jobs that are similar. So don't be applying on one day for a sales job, another day for a marketing job, another day for an IT job, and another day for customer support. If you're going crazy like that, then no one resume is ever going to be able to cover all those areas, right? We're assuming that you're applying for jobs that all sort of look the same. We need to understand what kind of role we want, okay, and why we want it. That has to be very clear to us. We also have to figure out what hiring managers for those really care about. Okay, we want the job, we want them to hire us, and we want them to understand why. they'd like to hire us. Okay, now this is going to be how you build one master resume with this understanding, okay? Knowing what people want, okay, and knowing what we want. Tailoring your resume shouldn't take any more than just a few minutes to do. And that is sort of critical. That means you can find a job that you're interested in, you can go to your resume, you can make changes to it, and you're good to go. All right, so what do recruiters look for when they see a resume? Great question. They're going to look for your job title. They're going to look for your years of experience. They're going to look at the sector you're working in, the company type and size, the key skills and the expertise required for the job, and of course, your educational qualifications. Okay. All these items hopefully are going to be covered on your master resume. Fabulous. You're taken care of, and you don't have to make any changes to them. Okay. So why tailor? Well, does my professional summary directly reflect the job requirements? Can someone instantly identify my industry experience, key skills, and relevant tools? Okay. And you want the answers to those questions to be yes. Okay. Look at my resume, see that I'm a match for this job. Let's move on. Give me an interview. Okay. So how do you actually go about tailoring your resume? So you want to match job titles. So if the job description says that they're looking for a senior project manager, and your resume currently says that you were a project lead, change it to be senior project manager. Make it easy for the people who are trying to fill the position. Adjust your top bullets. Don't just list job duties. Mirror what they're looking for in the job description. You want to make as much as you can your resume look like the job description. So it's very easy to do a match between what they're looking for and what you're bringing to the table. You want to make your qualifications obvious, right? If they want 5 years of experience, put it in your summary if you got it. Software skills, put it in your summary. Make it easy for someone to see that you're the right person for this particular job. All right, you want to match the job that you're applying for. You tailor your resume to the job that you're applying for. Applicant tracking system. So an applicant tracking system, or an ATS, is a software application that is currently being used by many companies to manage and streamline their entire recruiting and hiring process. You know, a company that puts a job offer out on LinkedIn is probably going to get 1,000 or more people responding to it, right? And they don't have the time to go through all of those application, all those resumes that have been sent to them. So they've got some software, and they're going to say, look, here's what we're looking for. Here's all the resumes. Go through these resumes and get rid of the ones that aren't even a close match. Make it so I only have to review the ones that are the best. Okay. To beat the ATS, you have to include relevant keywords that are included in the job description. I'm going to give you 2 different ways to go about doing that. So let's see what we can do for Richard here. Okay. So I went to LinkedIn, yay, and I went up into the job section and I said, hey, you know what Richard's really good at is surge suppression. And I got a whole bunch of jobs. So hats off to Richard. If he needs a new job, apparently there's a lot of things he can do. The one at the top was AECOM, production and control engineer. Okay, fabulous. And so they gave a little description about us, changed the world, and then here's this job description. Okay, so they give this whole long description about what it means to be a protection and controls engineer. Fantastic. So I can take that text and then I can go to this website that I found, which is called wordart.com. It says, hey, would you like to create a word cloud? And the answer is, yes, I would like to. I would like to import the text from that particular job description. I'm just going to drop it right here. And I'm going to say, yo, import the words. What it does then is it takes all the words in that and then it finds all the ones that are matched. So engineer was used 16 times, energy was used 12. And in fact, it'll even create a picture for me, which makes my life much easier. So poof, here's the word art for that job description. You can see that the biggest thing that they're showing is engineer. Energy is huge. Technical work, power, generate, develops, client, project, and design are very big. These are the words that mean the most to the person who's looking for the job. I had better make certain that those words are showing up in my resume because that's what they're looking for, right? Well, so this is one way to do it, and it's actually a really good way. Okay, and by the way, I've got a list of all the words that I want. I can see the frequency here. I can do a whole bunch of stuff. I can also go back to my buddy Claude, and I can say, yo, Claude, based on the, here, I'll even just snag all this stuff because I'm actually copying the description again, but we can take a look at it when I drop it in. Boom. Wow. All right. Based on the following job description that I'm about to share, list the top 20 keywords that I should be including in my resume to prove that I am the best candidate for this role. Here's the job description, and it's exactly what I copied from LinkedIn. So let's give it a shot and see what it says. Here are the top 20 keywords you should include in your resume based on this job description. Boom, 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 boom. Protection and controls, power system studies, relay protection. So Claude says, not a problem. I can do this thing, very, very easily. And he gives us all this fabulous information. Strategic integration tips. Use protection and controls engineer prominently. Emphasize your TCO dispatch center and power system. So Claude knows all about my resume, sees these words, and he tells me where actually they could be stuck in. So thank you very much, Claude. I really do appreciate that. Now, here's the concept is, I can take this one step further, right? Can you update Richard's resume to include the top technical role specific words? Claude says, that's why I was created, actually. Now, you got to see over on the right-hand side, you'll see that it's basically rewriting Richard's resume. As it goes through each and every line, it has a list of its top 20 words that it's going to find spaces to work into the resume. The challenge here is, how good of a job does Claude do? Claude actually does a fairly good job, but Richard is on the hook. He's going to have to go back and he's going to have to read through his resume before he submits it for the job to make sure that the wording still makes sense. Make sure that Claude didn't go overboard somehow and put too many of the buzzwords in, or put the buzzwords in the wrong place. That would be sort of a key thing that Richard be on the hook to make sure. Remember, AI is a fabulous tool. We really do love AI. We think it's fantastic and wonderful, and it certainly has the ability to make our life better. We appreciate that very much. But remember, at times it is possible it can go crazy or it can make mistakes just because it gets a bee in its bonnet or what have you, right? But if we take the time to review the material that the AI has produced, then it gives us a chance to make sure that it hasn't done anything that it shouldn't do. Note that what Claude's doing now is telling me exactly the changes he made to Richard's resume. Major updates: job title change from electrical engineer to protection and controls engineer. Core competencies he reorganized into focused areas, and a professional summary was rewritten to emphasize protection and controls experience and grid modernization. And then his experience and description enhanced each role to include relevant words naturally. He tells me the keywords that he worked in and strategic positioning. Fantastic, Claude, man, you got me taken care of. That was great. Okay. Now, here's an interesting point. I like this last one. So I've done all this stuff, right? So I've created Richard's resume. Thank you very much. And I've found a job that I'm interested. I've now worked in all those particular words and stuff like that. I can come back and ask Claude one more word here, one more question. Based on the job description that I shared above and my updated resume I'm about to share, does my resume effectively prove that I can do the job well? If not, tell me why not. Well, Claude, you wrote the damn thing, but okay, let's see. So, okay, so it's just grousing. Use Richard's resume. It got confused. It didn't know I already had Richard's resume. Okay, yay. Here's the analysis. Strong matches, what worked well, protection controls experience. Yeah. Oh, so there's some gaps. So there's some gaps between what Richard has done and what they're actually probably asking for it. Okay, that's fine. So he found the strong spots, he found the gaps, and he's got some concerns, but then he's got recommendations. Okay, add any software tools, emphasize any continuing education, highlight transferable skills, add any professional certifications, address the experience gap. So basically, Claude's able to help me make my resume stronger as I go for that particular job position. And I appreciate that very much. Edit resume to be strategically include the keywords. We got that taken care of. And include arguably 12 of the 20, which is probably about 60% of those 20 keywords. Final check. do a final check, ask AI. And we did that, right? We said, based on the job description that I shared above, my updated resume, what do you think? Are there any gaps? And Claude will take a look at it, compare the two, and come back and tell me where the gaps are and where, obviously where my strengths are. Man, I couldn't ask for any more if I wanted to. And that's it for tonight. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it very much. I hope you got something out of this. I will be posting the video of this particular presentation and all of my slides on the Florida West Coast website. You're more than welcome to go see the video and download the slides. Have a great evening. Talk to you later now. Bye-bye.